All right. So, well, first of all, thanks a lot for joining this call on the software craftsmanship community. This is a not-for-profit organization which is sponsored by Incubite. Our goal is to have people connect who love the craftsmanship aspect and have the craftsmanship mindset around software development. As I said, it's founded and sponsored by Incubite, and our mission is to increase awareness around the craft aspect of software development, and that's where this community fits in. Uh, and as a business, we help our clients create high quality software right from conceptualization to delivery. And I'm going to start recording this. It is recorded. Okay. Past events of this YouTube channel, of this community can be found on the YouTube channel. And this event as well will be recorded and then posted on the YouTube channel. Today we have Bansi Mehta on for the talk. She's going to talk about demystifying stakeholders, how to get buy-in from critical UX projects. She is founder and CEO of Koru UX Design and an inspiration to many people like us, as I said earlier, right, who always thought about becoming entrepreneurs. Her and Koru's mission is to increase design awareness among global corporations. And she writes and talks about UX strategy, product management, and building powerful teams. That being said, Bansi, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Savan. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. I think you're going to have to take the start sharing. I'm not able to stop it myself.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yep. Okay, great. All right. Well, I want you to take a moment and observe the emotions that you feel when you read these words. Workplace politics. Many of us cringe. Some of us might think ourselves to be too pure to be associated with workplace politics. But guess what? Every workplace is political. And why wouldn't it be? Check out the definition of politics. Politics is about making agreements between people so that they can live together in groups, such as tribes, cities, or countries. While we define ourselves as designers or software developers, if you look closely at work, we are dealing with people more than we are dealing with technology and tools. Tom DeMarco and Tim Lister, the authors of the book Peopleware, one of my favorites, over a period of multiple years, conducted a survey of people who were part of the projects that failed. And what they found that there was not a single technological issue to explain the failure. The cause of failure, most frequently cited by our survey participants, was politics. In a survey conducted by Nielsen Norman Group, asking UX professionals from all sizes of organizations about the top issues that UX teams face, this is what they found. Notice that 7 out of 10 issues listed here are related to people, especially the stakeholders, claiming 73% of this issue pie. As Frankie James, the founder of officepolitics.com says, you can't escape politics, no matter what your role or function. So once you decide to embrace this reality, you can weather and even participate in politics without selling your soul. And today, I'm going to talk about how to do just that. Support from stakeholders matters. In fact, the success or failure of our work depends on the views and perceptions of our stakeholders. By definition, a stakeholder is anyone who may be affected by what we are doing or can influence its success. Technically, by definition, this also includes users because they are affected by it. But for the purpose of discussion today, we are not going to include users. And when we talk about stakeholders, it would mean both internal and external stakeholders. So your boss, the cross-functional team that you work with, like engineering, design, marketing, sales, customer service, and also external like the board, investors, vendors, and of course the clients. The question that becomes important then is, what is the best way to get our stakeholders to agree to something? How do we ensure our stakeholders support us in what we are doing, that we get their buy-in? Well, the most successful strategy involves engaging the stakeholders. Engaging your stakeholders and actively working with them to establish shared understanding means you come across as someone who not only knows how to code or how to design, but someone who will do what it takes to make their work matter. And engaging stakeholder means we get to collaborate and partner with them, which creates an opportunity to leverage their knowledge and expertise, in turn helping the solution to be better. It helps you make strategic design decisions because now you understand what success looks like from different perspectives. It also gives stakeholders a chance to voice their concerns and opinions. And this has a twofold effect. One, people feel heard, and that itself put a lot of them at ease. And second, it allows you to anticipate what could go wrong. And if something goes wrong, what to do about it early in the process. This in turn reduces the friction and conflicts and equips us better in case they do arise. Now, stakeholder engagement is an iterative process. And those of you who are familiar with the iterative double diamond design methodology, this is very similar to that, where the first diamond is about understanding the stakeholder landscape. In the middle lies the creating engagement strategy part, and the second diamond is about executing the strategy. It goes through the divergence to learn who the stakeholders are, understanding their needs, and what success means to them. In other words, what matters to them and what makes them look good. Once we have built this understanding is when we converge and we define what we have learned, which in turn informs the engagement strategy. And from that point on comes actually going out there and engaging the stakeholders, trying various approaches and observing closely what's working and what's not. Based on this learning, we refine the strategy, continue to engage our stakeholders as we work towards one common goal. Let's deep dive. Understanding the stakeholder landscape is a simple 4-step process where you start by identifying the stakeholders. Sounds pretty simple. Understanding their needs through stakeholder interviews. Once you have the research insights in place, you map them and then you document your research. You can do this individually, you can also do this in group, and you can also do this as a workshop. The first step is identifying the stakeholders, where it's a pretty simple step, as I said, where you list down the potential stakeholders, discuss it briefly if you are doing it in a group. The end goal of this exercise is to prepare the master list of potential stakeholders. Now, a few things that could help you get going in terms of identifying and making sure that you have thought holistically and thought about all potential stakeholders is who is involved in making this project or initiative happen, who is affected when the project is being carried out, so throughout the duration of the project, who can support or derail the progress of this project, who will observe or monitor the project in progress, have an opinion related to this project, and whose opinion matters. And we have all come across situations, right, where sign-offs are held off because of somebody's opinion, not directly the decision makers, but somebody's opinion that they would that would matter to the decision makers. So whose sign-off, who will be doing the sign-off, whose opinion would matter, who will complain if something goes wrong with this project, who will be impacted by the outcome of this project, who needs to know the progress, and that informs us, or that tells us that as we go through the process, who needs the regular updates, at what frequency, what kind of updates, so on and so forth, who has the access to the budget and resources needed for this project, and hence we know that we definitely have their buy-in and their support for our work to continue and progress. Now, once you have the list of potential stakeholders, the next step is stakeholder interviews. And the accuracy of your mapping depends on whether you are starting with new stakeholders, in which case you would want to build the understanding, or you are starting with the familiar stakeholders with whom you might be working for some time now and have the fair understanding, and this is just a new project or new initiative you are starting on. If you are starting with new stakeholders and know very little about your stakeholders, one of the things that you could do is pair with someone who knows them. So, and even if it is at your client's end, it means that have one point person who in turn knows all these stakeholders and pair with them, and then conduct the interviews one-on-one with the stakeholders to learn more about them and validate. On the other hand, if you are starting on a new project with the familiar stakeholders with whom you have worked earlier, in that case, it is still a good idea to conduct the stakeholder interviews. You could use the new project or the initiative or your association that you might be new to the project team as an opportunity to deepen your connection with stakeholders and to build a shared understanding of what we are doing and why. When I start on a new project where stakeholders are new, I start with something, or I use a very simple template like this. The purpose of this template is really just to get the conversation started. And once we have this template and we start the conversation, it actually quickly expands into where people talk about, oh, there are other teams or there are other individuals from teams who might be important people for us to consider, who should be included and why they should be included. Not only that, and not only just their name and title, they also start talking about why this person is important, that, oh, they have a strong pull on the leadership team and we need their buy-in, and that's why this person should be included or this team should be included, so on and so forth. And this serves as a great basis to then plan the stakeholder interview. Then this in turn informs you that when you plan one-on-one interviews with these stakeholders, what would be the things, or what would be the area that you want to touch upon and why with that stakeholder. Now, when stakeholders are new, you can start by asking them questions to know about what's their role and background, what's their personality, and what are their calendar norms, what is their communication preference, and so on. This might sound trivial, but one, people feel great talking about themselves. And two, knowing these details get a lot of things streamlined from the beginning, as opposed to discovering them as we go. For example, yesterday I was talking to our point person for one of our projects, a VP of product, and this was about third conversation that I was having with him. But the one-on-one setting, because this time was marked for stakeholder interview, so the one-on-one setting plus the focus on learning about the person helped me learn that he has been an entrepreneur. He sold his company and took this job because he loves to take up strategic and messy products and turn them around. And this is his fifth such venture. What it tells me is that he means it. He means it. He really means it when he says that, team, we are going to turn this around, that we are going to make a real change here. On the other hand, when you're dealing with familiar stakeholders, you might not want to go through the background and the details. You might already know their communication preference, their personality, and how they usually work and think. In this case, the focus of questions then becomes understanding their perspective of the business goal with regards to the new project or initiative that you're starting, what they think of the current solution, what constraints they think will stay versus go away as we embark on the project, and most importantly, agreeing to the success metrics. And it has tremendous value if we can get our stakeholders to speak it out, that what success means to them with regards to the initiative or with regards to the project that we are starting or working on. For example, a couple of weeks back, we were starting on a new project, but there were 3 stakeholders and we were working with them for several months, with one of them actually more than a year. And I almost felt that we know everything we need to know about them and probably we could skip it. But then when we did the interview, what I learned was that each one of them had a different version of the scope for the solution we were going to build. And not only this became evident when we presented our research to them, but we could also bring them to agree to common boundaries for the scope. Another interesting thing that happened was that as we talked about it, one of the stakeholders actually said that they have been doing on the side a lot of online competitive research and they could share it with us. And when we looked at it, that was great because that saved us a lot of competitive research that we were planning to do, and it gave us a great head start. So doing stakeholder interviews, planning for them beforehand based on the situation, and then diving on some of the aspects could really bring great alignment, understanding, highlight the gap or discrepancies, and that in turn sets the project to a very good start. Now, once you have synthesized the information through talking with different stakeholders through the interview, the next thing comes is plotting or mapping. For most UX practitioners, it's not a new thing. We do all sorts of mapping, be it affinity mapping, journey mapping, service blueprint, so on and so forth. In this case, we are doing stakeholder mapping, and mapping is always a fun exercise. There are multiple methods for mapping the stakeholders and multiple routes that you can go. For example, there is one very simple model called salience model, where it's a Venn diagram, and there are 3 aspects that we are thinking from. One, in terms of stakeholders, who has the power, who has the legitimacy to tell that we need to do this or we need to deliver, or who can order us around or request things, who can bring the sense of urgency that if something comes from them, it means it's urgent. And then when there is a combination, what it could mean in terms of what is the situation and hence how we need to handle it. So that's salience model. There is also a proximity chart where at the heart, at the core is the project or initiative that you are working on. And then from there on, you start mapping the stakeholders based on who is closest to that project versus farthest, and also who is on the opposer's side versus who is on the supporter's side. And this again gives you the priority in terms of, so number 1, number 2, number 3, and what's the priority, who falls under priority 1 versus priority 2, and hence how are you going to engage with them or how much attention you are going to pay to them, so on and so forth. Third, model, which looks slightly complex, but what it really is about, that based on people's influence, each of those nodes show the size. In terms of size, it shows the amount of influence they hold. The shape shows that whether they are supporters or opposers. What makes it very, very interesting is that as you map and as you start building the connection amongst the different nodes, what you start seeing is cluster of people that form groups. And you'll find within those groups hubs or people who are central to the groups, the connectors. That also people who are connectors are the people who have the foot in two or more groups, and hence you know that, oh, they are listening to or they have influence over not just one group but multiple. And then outliers, people who are independently working. And this kind of a mapping is very, very helpful when you are dealing with potentially large set of stakeholders, highly political organization or team structure, where there will be a lot of groups, there will be a lot of people not directly influencing or taking part in the conversation, but you know that who has whose ears and how things are playing out. Mapping it prepares you for the situation, and also for that matter understand that what is what, which way the power lies. The most common model is power metrics or impact versus influence metrics, where what you do, it's a simple two-axis map. One represents the power based on the authority the stakeholders have over the project or their ability to affect the outcome. And the other is the interest, that what is the level of interest or concern related to your project. Once you plot them, you know that who has high power, high interest, and so on and so forth. What it means is, then it tells you that, oh, what's the priority? That high power, high interest means priority one. And what it means in terms of what we need to do is that they are key stakeholders and we want to engage them closely, versus high power, low interest are the people we want to actively consult, so on and so forth. What I have found most useful is a hybrid model which leverages the power metrics, but instead of just working with two parameters, there is one more dimension or parameter that you could add to it. Let's take a look at that. In terms of hybrid model, now UX maturity is one of the parameters that we can all relate to, where we would want to prioritize UX maturity as a parameter when you have a few key stakeholders with low UX maturity. It allows you to be proactive about anticipating and managing the impact where these stakeholders are involved. Similarly, there are oftentimes projects where we are dealing with legacy knowledge, and legacy knowledge, especially when there are no documented processes and the knowledge lives in people's head. In that case, you also want to see that along with the power and interest, who possesses the legacy knowledge and hence becomes the gatekeeper to the power, right, to the knowledge. You could also include attitude as a parameter, especially when you know the work that you are doing is going to cause disruption for some departments and stakeholders. In, again, highly political places where there are significant number of people who influence the team dynamics, can sway decision makers, where decision could be driven out of position and power, or when your project affects many people across teams, you would also want to include political clout as additional parameter. How does it work? Again, it's simple. You use your power metrics as the basis, and that gives you your priority. Your focus is priority 1 and 2. Now, for those stakeholders, you pick any of these parameters, and based on what is the parameter and the priority, it tells you that what you need to do. For example, if there is a priority 1 stakeholder who has negative attitude towards the work that you are doing, you want to be beware. You want to take special measures to make sure that this is managed, that this is handled, and that you take active measures to contain it or sway it for that matter. For example, we were working on an internal CRM tool for a telco client where there were a lot of redundancy, and streamlining the UX also meant that we would be changing the business processes, and that could potentially mean shuffling or change of jobs. Some people also losing jobs. This was huge. Now, we couldn't change what we were hired for, but by mapping who is for and who is against, we could prepare ourselves in advance on the reaction and resistance from different people and department. We could also be mindful in terms of tweaking the language of our communication so that we are sensitive and inclusive. Take extra measures to put people at ease, give them double assurance, and not thinking of that as that, oh, this is an extra effort, but understanding that this is needed for so and so purpose and being prepared for that, especially when we are going to break news to them in terms of these are the findings from our researchers, this is the direction that we are heading in, and potentially what it could mean for them and people around them. Last but not least, this also highlighted who can be hostile, and there were a few people who were hostile, and what we need to do about that. Now, while mapping, a few questions that could help you map them correctly on whichever model that you use are: who are the stakeholders and who are they connected with? What do we need from them? What are they expecting from us? What do they want from us? What resources they command? What are the risks they pose? And what opportunities do they offer to you? Thinking in this direction allows you to, and of course, all the learnings that you have from the stakeholder interviews, the initial identification, when you all gather all of these things together is when things start coming together. And that's what gets us to our next step, which is documenting the research. Now, all these things that we have learned, we want to document so that we can refer to it, we can come back to it later in the future. One of the ways of documenting or one of the primary collaterals is stakeholder profile. You could also create stakeholder persona if you are dealing with, again, large set of stakeholders. And in that case, instead of creating individual persona, you just want to create individual profiles. You just want to create a persona that represents types of stakeholders. However, what I have found to be most effective is when we create the stakeholder profile for individual key stakeholders. You can keep adding them to your stakeholder register. So you can do this in phases. You don't have, if you have, let's say, 8, 10, 15 different stakeholders that you've identified of different priorities, you don't have to take up an extensive exercise of trying to interview all of them and create the profile for each one of them. And that's where the mapping and priority comes into play. You do want to make sure that you start with priority 1 stakeholders, create their profile, put them in the register, and then as time permits, go after 2 and 3 and so on. As over the period of time, especially for the organizations and team where people work together over a long period of time, it particularly helps to build the stakeholder register, because then you can, even if there is a gap in between, now you are again tasked or paired with somebody you had worked, let's say 6 months, 10 months back. It allows you to it allows you to go and refer to that stakeholder profile. That becomes your starting point. You still might want to do the stakeholder interview to bring the alignment, but definitely you have a really good head start with that. When we say stakeholder profile, few things that a stakeholder profile hosts are the basics: name, what is their role and experience. Also a few personality related things, that what are their strengths. If somebody needs help or somebody is in a situation, what are the things that this particular person can help with? And what are the weaknesses that they have? What is it that we as a team need to watch out for or help them manage? Similarly, what is their communication preference? And then the bottom parameters are the most important ones because that's what guides the engagement strategy directly. So what is their attitude towards the project? Again, something that we learned from the mapping and interviews. What is the priority? What is their position? And by position, what I mean is, in terms of if middle is the neutral, are these the stakeholders, are they on the opposer side or the supporter side, and where they are currently versus based on their priority, what is the desired position we want them in. So this just allows you to mentally know that, oh, this is a key stakeholder, they're against, and we want to work with them or work on them continuously so that they come closer towards the right-hand side. Once you fill out the stakeholder profile, this is how it could look. And as you start building it, you notice, for example, in this case, if you look at the attitude, one of the insights that we found was that while the attitude is positive in terms of the work that we are doing as UX team, and this person it truly believes that UX can solve some of the existing challenges that they have, she was against doing just cosmetic changes. And that allows us to be mindful that when we present, while some of the things, as we talk at a superficial level or just as we're going through things fast, if we are not going deeper enough and understanding and bringing out the value of this change and just talking at a UI or cosmetic level, it might turn her off. So we would want to be careful about it in our communication with the stakeholder. So these are the insights and things that informs that how the communication should be. It allows you to then decide that how best to approach the person or present your work, and in turn increasing the chances or possibility of your work actually getting the approval, getting into the production, so on and so forth. Now, once you have completed all 4 steps, you have a clear understanding of your stakeholder landscape, and this helps forming a sound engagement strategy, irrespective of whether it's your lucky day and you have met with the perfect set of stakeholders or with a usual combination of the good, the bad, and the ugly. What does creating stakeholder engagement strategy means? Again, it's not a rocket science, and it does not require a lot of effort. What it requires is a little bit of mindfulness and taking proactive measures towards it. This is it. Even if stakeholder engagement is not what on your mind, some of the things are you would see that you would anyways be doing when you are starting a new engagement. So bringing this entire alignment to stakeholder engagement and the strategy actually can give you more value out of the exercise or efforts that you might be already putting. For example, taking out time to scan that as we will work together as a team, what will be our communication plan? What are some of the touch points that we need in terms of synchronous collaboration? What would be the frequency of it? What would be the agenda for each one of those touch points? Who would drive that? And is there an alternative? Similarly, for asynchronous collaboration, again, what are some of the tools or platforms that we will use for collaboration? What would we dedicate for what? For example, that if prototyping and iteration and design conceptualization, these are the core aspects of the project, then a lot of interaction would happen actually via tools like Figma. If it's a long ongoing project or based on whatever project methodology, Jira, what would happen there? Similarly, many times people have questioned in terms of when we do UX research, what would be the tools that would be used? And if once the different phases of discovery or research is done, where would we go and find that research, how it would be hosted, how it would be packaged, and how it can be accessed, so on and so forth. So taking out time to think about all of this, agreeing on it as a team can again streamline things, bring all of them on the same page. But it doesn't stop there. This is just the first step where we think about the communication plan. What's important is the engagement plan. Now that an engagement plan is actually an extension of the stakeholder profile that we are building, that for a particular stakeholder, especially high priority, key stakeholders, who is going to be the owner or the custodian from our team, who will be the responsible person to keep in touch with this particular stakeholder. And again, instead of 2-3 different people trying to engage with the stakeholder, it makes sense if we have one person who is the primary person, and then of course everybody is allowed and free to interact, but that way we know that we are not duplicating effort, we are not stepping on each other's toes. So who is that responsible person? What is the objective of the engagement? That what do we want to achieve out of this engagement? Do we have any specific outcome in mind? What is the engagement level? How much? What is the amount of engagement that we need from them? Right? Is it a person with whom we want to work on a daily basis? That they should be informed and they should know the nitty-gritties and details of our work? Is this a person who, if they just know the sprint by sprint update, that's good enough? Or is this a person who, if we are just informing them strategically that this was our quarterly goal, every quarter this is the progress we have made, that's good enough? So depending on what is the engagement level that is needed with them, right? What are the methods and activities? And that goes back to what we have learned in stakeholder interviews, that what are the modalities, what are the channels that they prefer, and how are we going to talk to them? What is the frequency? This is an example of engagement plan for a particular stakeholder, where in this case, if you look at the engagement objective, what we wanted to achieve out of this was that, so with this particular client or account, we were working in bits and pieces, in the sense we would work with some product teams, and there would be great UX work happening. But if we look beyond and see at at an entire product level, our end goal was that UX should become an integrated part of the product management and development process, as opposed to it being dependent on the particular stakeholder that we are working on. That if the stakeholder approves, then UX is integrated, otherwise it's not. That's not how it should be. And we clearly saw that this stakeholder could really help us with this. It would be a nice long-term goal to work with them on that. So as you start mapping, adding details, it gives clarity, and it also gives purpose of engagement. Now, one word of caution, I would like to say that it is critically important for the leadership at an organization to make sure that for large and high-stake projects, designers or developers are not tasked with uncovering this stakeholder landscape and devising an engagement strategy on the go. It is very, very risky and highly inefficient. It could be emotionally taxing for them, could be demotivating, and especially if they are met with politically charged attacks or hard to reason with resistance, which happens. It's not uncommon at all. It also makes them susceptible to being misguided, costing them time and money, and sometimes credibility too. So it is important that for especially large projects, a lot of stakeholder involved, or where projects, we can't fail at those projects, those high stake projects, right? This is something that it comes from leadership, and it becomes part of our working or how we approach. Now, once you have engagement strategy in place,
hey, Bansi,
the next step.
Bansi.
Yep.
I don't know if it's true for everyone else or not, but I see just now a desktop. I don't know. First it was a black screen. Now it's like a background of a desktop or something. Is this a slide that has just one picture?
Yes.
Okay. Earlier it was just a black screen. It just updated for me. Thanks a lot. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No problem. I have some black screens in between when I don't have anything to show. I'm just talking.
Ah, got it.
Probably I should have clarified that earlier. Now, once you have the engagement strategy in place, next step, we move to the second diamond, which is actually about executing the strategy. And unfortunately, there, this is not the desktop. There is no one ring to rule them all. So those of you who are familiar with Lord of the Ring, there is no one ring to rule them all. However, there are a few strategies that could help you navigate your way around. Their effectiveness depends on the mastery over core leadership and management skills, but nonetheless, as you become aware of the strategies and start practicing it, you can see them becoming more effective for you. So talking about engaging stakeholders and talking about the strategies, if there was only one takeaway for you that you could take away from this particular session, I would want it to be this strategy, where interest is at the core of engagement. And interest in this internet world is a rare commodity. So bring out the creative person in you, apply the creative and fresh thinking when you create an engagement strategy. Make it interesting for your stakeholders. It is not hard. As I said, it requires a little bit of creative thinking and fresh thinking and just the will to go about it. And if you let's look at how we can make it more interesting for them. It could be as simple as being aware and being where your audience is. So observe and learn that which channels get you maximum response from your stakeholder. Is there a particular group of stakeholders who is active on Slack? Do some of them always respond to emails but never on Teams? Are there some who always respond to meeting invites versus some who just show up but wouldn't mark their acceptance for the meeting? Who in the team never reads the decks or documents that we share? And you can sense that based on how they respond when someone brings up the topic or follows up. The idea here is not to judge or complain about them, but to be smart and find ways so their style doesn't become an obstacle for our work. Tweak your communication channels based on what gives you a maximum and efficient response. Ask your key stakeholders what modality they prefer and which ones they despise. And most people are happy to share their preferences and in fact appreciate it if you communicate via their preferred modality. For example, I was working with a stakeholder, a chief product officer, and it was not that he wouldn't reply to my emails, but when I was talking to him one-on-one, he said he hates emails. Not only that, his inbox and calendar is managed by his executive assistant. So I ended up asking him what would he prefer, and he said that he would actually prefer communicating via Slack, and we did not have access to the Slack channel because it was a client side. But then he suggested that he'll add me and my team to the existing channel, and from that point on, the whole engagement changed. Not only we got feedback quickly, we also got to watch the communication he was having with rest of the team. We understood that where his focus is at the moment and what are his priorities. And when we did not hear from him, we had a better context of why. So you can also proactively capture this during stakeholder interview. And if you are dealing with a large number of stakeholders, sending out a survey works too. I have seen people doing this where they would use these questions as a base and turn it into a survey and send it out to the large set of stakeholders. As they gather the information, they actually understand what works for where, with whom, and what are the patterns, and then based on that, devise the engagement or communication plan with them. So be where your audience is, understand that which medium or which channel would give you maximum engagement or response, and be smart about it. Second thing is make it easier for them to engage. And none of us are consciously doing that, where we don't want to make things harder for them. It's the other way around, where unconsciously, when we are not thinking enough, is when it happens. The thing is that one size doesn't fit all. So it requires continuous sense and respond approach, that someone has to be conscious about it and tweak the communication strategy or the style based on what's working and what's not working. Like, I was working with a client, which was a startup, where things moved fast. They had a small team and everyone was caught up on everything. So when we would give them a walkthrough of the design or present user feedback, they would quickly get impatient and jump the discussion or start giving feedback before we could go through everything we had. And this happened 2-3 times. Is when we were thinking that we need to try something different, and we tried a few things. After some trial and error, what worked really well was that we would record short 1 or 2 minute videos covering the workflow of our work that we wanted to present. And if there were multiple things, we would still break it into smaller workflows. Each workflow would kind of cover kind of have a cover slide having highlighted points, so that even if somebody's just watching and not listening, they still know that what this workflow has, and then just post it on the Slack channel for them. This bite-sized updates, people loved. They would see it on the go and respond to the thread as they would see it. What happened was that then the calls that we used to have, that became about exchanging the feedback and discussing the next steps. On the contrary, with another project, we had large set of stakeholders with different people who were in charge of different parts of products or modules, as you say. Now here, giving detailed demo with proper context was essential. Not only that, doing a quick recap at the end, it actually helped us get more engagement from cross-functional teams and get everyone into alignment and understanding. So decide that what works for which group in what setting, and it's giving you the engagement that you need. And then until you really get to that balance, be willing to keep trying and trying different approaches. The human brain is wired to look for what is in it for me. So in any, and it does not matter what it is, whether it's an email or a conversation, or you are just meeting and just doing hype, the brain is consciously thinking about that. So a smart approach or smart strategy is, when you have a conversation, lead with what is in it for them. Don't make it a suspense. Do not make it or for them to intercept that what is in it for me? What is your ask? What are you trying to say? What do you need from me? What do you have for me? Make it clear as much as possible, irrespective of the medium you are communicating via. Make your work easier for them to review and respond to. And especially in design, this is very important, where there are many touch points where we are reviewing the work, and it's not always just the design or visual. Sometimes we are reviewing the research. Sometimes we are reviewing the outcome. Sometimes we are just screening and identifying the users that we want to interview. And at other times, there are ideas, concepts, strategies, and prototypes, whatnot. So being creating about it, like for example, again, posting video recordings on the Slack channel, where it does not require people to be in front of their computers, open the link, open it in another browser, and then watch it. But just like how anyone would watch swipe through a few posts on Instagram or watch a few TikTok videos on the go, this becomes as easy as that. And this is something that we have been trying, and it has given us a lot of traction, not only for one client, but across the board. Make your emails work for you. It might sound very easy and a very very obvious thing, but it is not. In practice, as we see more and more communication with more and more people, this is not the obvious pattern or skill. long emails and emails with attachment, links that open in another software to see the work or to refer to something that you're trying to say, it seemed like a lot of work and can easily make people feel that they'll get to it when they have more time at hand, which rarely happens. Everyone is busy and have their own list of things to do. So make it crisp, make it easy to access, go through, and then reply to. Be clear, what is the point, what is it about, what do you need from them, and why. Having thoughtful subject line could give you more response. Writing a motivational line when you send an invite, especially for things like a workshop or a brainstorming session where you want people to come being prepared and motivated, it works great. Having a single call to action in the email, posing a question as this or that, so people could just simply say that makes it again easy to get a response from the stakeholders. For example, sending a sprint report, it could be a fully detailed sprint report for people who would want to look at all the details, but just agreeing on a template where it's a high-level summary for anyone to just glance through it, and when they are not interested in detailed report, could really work, could really keep everyone oriented on where we are, what's happening, what needs the attention. For workshop invites, I have seen people sending a big guide as an attachment of do's and don'ts, but just sending out, just writing a couple of thoughtful lines can actually give people orientation in terms of what is expected out of it, what is okay and what is not okay, and the rest kind of falls in line. More often than not, each stakeholder that we deal with has a different perception of what UX team's role is, and it often doesn't, they often do not know the best ways to work together, and it's not their fault. In last 1 decade, the UX market has changed significantly in terms of UX practices, project management framework, as well as UX roles and team compositions. So invest time to give clarity on role and processes. This again doesn't require huge efforts, just a little bit of design thinking and initiative. Educate them about how to work with the UX team, and it could be through a simple walkthrough or presentation where we talk about here's the UX team, what guides their work, what can they expect when working with the design team. And I think same goes for developers as well. When they are following, when there are certain principles or process or methodology that guides their work that are essential for people to understand so that they know that why they do certain things in certain way, having something that explains people and just orients them towards what to expect as they work with you can smoothen, make the journey ahead a lot more smoother. You could also conduct a brief design thinking workshop. Nothing opens up people like a workshop where they co-create something. Also, take time to clarify roles. Titles could be confusing. Take time to understand each role and share it with the team, that what each of the titles in the team means and what is their responsibility. Collaborate to define responsibilities, especially when there are overlapping ones. For example, with one of our clients, we were doing the discovery as the design team, and the product management team got really excited, and they were like, this is great. And we also talk to customers, and we could actually also do discovery. And I was like, that's great. In fact, they had access to the customers that we didn't have, where they had access to critical, their key customers, where they have done a lot of customization for them and integration for them. And if we could have their ears and we could understand how things work for them, that could help a lot. So instead of duplicating the work or stepping on each other's toes, we could actually collaborate and say that, okay, if we are both are responsible for this, what should be the focus, who does what, and hence not only eliminating the duplication of work, but also a lot of emotional stress along the way and heartache. The activities related to clarifying the process and role could be baked into the engagement strategy itself, that at these points, or when this happens, we are going to do this kind of a workshop at this frequency or at this point, so on and so forth. Now, we all have encountered what we call the difficult stakeholder. And handling difficult stakeholders is one of the top obstacles in stakeholder engagement. What helps is to have a game plan. First, it starts by tracing down the difficult stakeholder on our stakeholder map. So we know that how much to worry about them, what amount of efforts to engage. You don't want to spend a lot of efforts on the stakeholders who make a lot of noise but is not high priority. So, and on the other hand, if it's an important stakeholder, analyze what's driving this behavior. Is it an attitude problem or a personality trait? If it's an attitude problem, then you would want to go back to this map and see that what is their current position, what will be the desired or ideal position. And when you choose or decide the ideal position, again, you don't want them in an ideal position. You don't want everyone to be cheering for you. Sometimes just moving them one position is good enough. You really need what is good enough for your purpose. And when you devise the strategy to move their position, again, we don't have to move, even if we have to move multiple steps, just moving them to one step at a time is a more practical approach and a doable approach. Understand that moving people's current beliefs and position often requires running multi-channel long-term campaigns. For example, when the goal is to improve organizational UX maturity, it is not a one-person job, and you can't do it as a side project when you have in your spare time. If you find yourself tasked with moving key stakeholders to faraway places, I recommend reading Catalyst, again, another one of my favorites by Jonah Berger. On the other hand, if you are dealing with a personality problem, who are you dealing with? Is it a visionary? Is it a toxic? Is it a bully? Or simply a disengaged stakeholder? And again, there are some tips and tactics to handle each one of them. What helps is being aware that who is who, and not feel attacked or unprepared in the moment. For example, typical traits of a visionary are when, if you have someone who come across, if you come across someone who loves to talk about the big picture, the green field, what it could be, innovation and radical solutions, but have difficulty in stating the specifics and sticking to them, you know that you are dealing with a visionary. Some of the things that could help tackling them is listen to them patiently, but continue to bring the discussion around to the requirements at hand. You can educate them about the efforts and time it's going to require if accomplish what they have in their mind. Leverage the low-fi prototypes, which requires less efforts, but it still makes them feel that we are listening to them and doing something about it. However, make sure that if it's moving forward, then you are not just going around in the circle. At every stage, you have official sign-off. On the other hand, if you are encountered with a person where someone is nice to your face, but might badmouth you behind your back, they might make you feel like they are in your team until you realize they are not. They might be running their own propaganda on the side. You know that you are dealing with a toxic. The tips to handle them could be: one, the safest, keep your distance from them, find ways to work around them if you can. It might not be always possible, in which case you want to be cautious, where you gather proof by recording every agreement and important decisions that involve them. You could also expose them without telling on them by just highlighting the gap between what's their current state and what was their previous stand on particular things. This is the hardest one. I have personally come across many in my work life. When you hear the loudest voice in the room filled with aggression and impatience, you know you are dealing with a bully. They lack emotional maturity, they're dismissive of anyone else's opinion, and they can easily turn hostile and will intimidate anyone who can be intimidated. So to counter that, one of the best strategies is, whether you feel that way or not, but exhibit confidence, have strong first impressions. Do not give them satisfaction of intimidating you. Run your meetings actively and aggressively so that there is not only one person who is speaking, but you create opportunity and give chance for other voices also to be heard. Ask them questions like, why do you think that's a problem? Or why do you think this solution would not work? What data you have to back it up? And that should contain the discussion. Lastly, the disengaged stakeholder. If you have the name on the stakeholder list, but you find it extremely hard to get hold of them, they're always traveling or busy, or the calendar is packed, or they would just not respond to your emails or messages, you are dealing with a disengaged stakeholder. Disengaged doesn't mean they are against you or your work. It just means it's not a priority for them. So keep that in mind. You don't have to take it personally. Reduce dependency on them as much as you can. That's the first way. Still continue to provide concise and regular updates. You still want to keep them in loop. You still want them to subconsciously register what's happening and that you exist and that the project is moving forward. Most effectively, if you can have a dialogue with them and can get them to agree to delegate their role or appoint somebody else from their team as a representative, that could work really well too. Now, dealing with one or two difficult stakeholders is a common situation and something we all come across more often than we would like. So learning the tactics and making a game plan is a smarter strategy than playing victim. This brings us to the last strategy and last part of our discussion today, and that I would talk about someone that I personally look up to. Daniel Rosenberg is an acclaimed design executive, professor at San Jose State University, and he's the founder of Interaction Design Foundation, or IDF, as many of us know. He has published a framework for UX management, where this framework has 4 management patterns, starting at the top: planning, decision-making, tactical operations, conflict techniques. For people in UX management business, I recommend studying this framework in detail because he has taken management concepts and really explained them from the design operations perspective. For our discussion today, I will zoom into the 4th pattern and speak about conflict management through him. As Daniel said rightly, there are times when a leader needs to go to war. It should be avoided, but not at all cost. Now, before we get into what and how, please note that out of all patterns in UX management framework, conflict patterns are the most complex to execute. They rely on leadership skills in conjunction with the 4 management skills that we just saw. Success is directly correlated to personal credibility, how much credibility the person who is carrying it out holds within the organization, with the leadership, and which can build only through a track record of delivery and respectful engagement over years with prior stakeholder transaction. This means that veteran managers with political capital will have higher probability of successfully executing any of the conflict patterns. But someone who is new, newly hired person, or less in their experience and exposure would have, for them, it could easily backfire. So a word of caution there when you get into conflict patterns. How to survive
Bansi,
and win.
Bansi,
Yes?
a quick time check before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How much time do we have, Sapan?
We are almost 7 minutes over right now, so maybe try to time box it to next. I don't know, your call. Just giving you a time check. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think I'll go through this one fast, probably another 5 minutes if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, all right, great. Surviving and winning conflict battles. When you must engage in conflict, a few things that could really help and come to help. One of the things is, as Don Corleone, the mafia head from 1972 movie, The Godfather, says, keep your friends close and enemies closer, especially when conflicts are related to resource ownership, UX authority. When conflicts come, UX is blamed from upstream or downstream organization for the shortcoming of their own making. When found in these situations, leverage the connections that you have built and know that what's really going on. What is the reason that is driving this behavior? During organizational restructuring, it actually helps that you take active part in these changes as opposed to by default assuming that it's bad. And also let your fate being decided behind the closed doors. Establish real-time unbiased channels. Building relationships and credibility with multiple stakeholders and peers always pay off because that's when it goes beyond your team. It is built through the track record of delivering results, as I said earlier, but in the time of conflict or corporate turbulence, having allies gives you a stronger position to fight from. This also means more intel, but you do want to double check all intelligence before you act on them. Lastly, be brave but not naive. While engaging in conflicts, you want to make sure that you secure your and your team's position, that you do not make that vulnerable. This also means ensuring future opportunity for you and the in the organization and within the executive community. This might sound really simple, but very important that if you are attacked, let your emotions stabilize before you respond. Having said that, courage is the most important skill. It is required both for taking risks and bearing the consequences of the failure. I can't conclude this strategy without adding again a word of caution that whatever might be the reason, understand that the cost of engaging in conflict is high and long lasting. It could damage the relationships that took significant time to build. So analyze the risk of side effects and collateral damage, including the credibility of you and your team. At this point, you might wonder that this is a lot of work. Where do you draw a line? How do you decide how much is enough, right? The answer is it varies from situation to situation. For example, if it's a short-term one-off project, it could be transactional, but at times the stakes are high and you can't fail. And this is where you want to go all out and make sure that you have proper engagement strategy in place. Who does what, and the team composition also matters. If you have the management role within the team, then it becomes easier and obvious that that person becomes responsible for this, and then everyone helps the person, and you as a team have someone who is dedicatedly in charge of that. But then even if it's not and you are this single person, you would still want to gauge that what is the importance of the project, client, what it would mean if we fail at it, so on and so forth. And lastly, The size and stage of the organization would also matter. So if it's a startup with a lot of people wearing multiple hats, would be very hard to know whose role is what and who is doing what. So some of the measures you might want to focus more, like role clarity, process. You might also want to understand, because things would change fast and continuously. So a different approach might be required there. For the long-term success of your work and career, a stakeholder engagement strategy can't be an afterthought. If done well, it means the UX team is actually able to make an impact by positively steering the outcomes. And when outcomes are delivered consistently, it builds credibility with the leadership and the organization. So be patient with yourself as you go about applying these strategies. The art of engaging stakeholders is a continuous practice that keeps evolving with you. Once you start paying attention to it, you will see its impact beyond the boundaries of professional needs. Whether you are planning to join an advisory board or participate in the parent-teacher conference at your kid's school, try these strategies. Focus on the rules of understanding your stakeholder landscape. Create a strategy to align common goals, and you will be delighted to see how much you are able to accomplish with minimum friction and stress. Once you start seeing the change in the outcomes, spread the word. Pass these tactics along to young practitioners struggling to engage stakeholders. Because just knowing these strategies can bring a calming inner strength, making the professional journey more meaningful and less traumatic. Thank you.
Hey, Bansi, thanks a lot. Uh, Great talk, by the way, and really some of it, I think, not just for design, but we do a lot of different kinds of work, from data to pure software development to, and we actually find this a lot. There are 10 people and 10 people have different goals coming out of the same project, right? For someone, it may be very personal that they want to grow in their career. For someone, it may be, hey, I want to make my CEO happier than I am, or, could be many, many different reasons why everyone is doing the exact same project. Uh, but I think there's one question that I had was it sounded so much personalized to every single stakeholder, and every single stakeholder does have different ways of communicating, right? Someone may prefer Slack, while other may prefer emails. And so do you, when you are working, do you do all, let's say if there are 5 stakeholders and 3 communication channels that they prefer, you communicate through all 3, like send one a WhatsApp message, other a Slack, and third one a email?
It would depend. If our work depends on hearing from them, then we would try whatever it takes, because not doing that means our work is anyway stalled.
Awesome. And this is so much data that you may have. If you're working with bigger teams, you may have data for easily anywhere between 50 to 100 people, right? So how do you kind of, first of all, how do you manage it? So if I saw someone had already actually asked the question, are there online or open source tools where you could do this? So first is managing the data alone, and second is figuring out what to do with it. Once sometimes you have like data about hundreds of people, but how do you effectively use it to get your projects forward?
So there's something called magic stakeholder number, and what that essentially means is that you want to be mindful of how many stakeholders you carry along with you for a given project. And if there are large groups and you just cannot shed the number, then you still want to create the groups and pick representative for each of those groups so that your number is minimized. That itself allows you to then manage in terms of doing the personalization thing, right? As in creating the profile and then creating the strategy. And for ongoing teams, that's where that stakeholder register comes into play, where we are continuously building it. It's not expected that we build it in one go, but over the period of time we build it. And for larger projects, I've also seen that some organizations have communications manager, because if change management is very important and it's going to affect the success of the project, they actually appoint someone who will do just this, like campaigning to make sure everyone is aligned and on board to that. And that person can be in charge of doing a lot of these things.
Awesome. And are there any tools? I think there's a question asked by Sajag. If there are any like open source or online tools which can help you create these engagement maps or tables and all sort of things.
No, these are all still manual.
Excel. Okay. That's a good product idea. Yes. Well, now I have actually a few questions, but rather than me asking if there are any other questions, let's give maybe 2 or 3 more questions. If there are any other questions that any of the attendees have, let's take them. Please raise your hand. No, nothing?
I have one follow-up question on Sapan's earlier question. So when Sapan said that there are there are multiple mediums of communication between different stakeholders, and we have to keep them in Zoom. So how do we sync them? How do we sync all of them and all the communication across everyone when we are using multiple mediums?
So if there are multiple channels that you are planning to utilize, again, being strategic about it in the sense deciding beforehand that what communication goes where, you want to do that. If you have the product manager or someone who is responsible for the communication, someone who can be the helping hand, then you can also decide who is the owner of it and will be doing it. Important communication, if you are using multiple channels because one channel works for one person, you would still want to make sure that you have not kept anyone out of the loop, and whatever has to be officially done. For example, if there is a sprint report that has to go out to a set of people, whether some of them read or not, you want to send it out nonetheless. But if you want that one person particularly responds to it or pays attention to a particular item, then you might want to send it out to them, or just a snippet, or just saying that this is the highlight for you, and so on and so forth. So it will require that a tweak in the strategy.
Right. Thank you. I think Parvati has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Bansi, for that talk. Actually, this is like one of the really interesting ways that I've seen trying to like understand the stakeholder, so to speak, psychology and behavior to get a favorable response and to take the project forward. And I think this could be applied to a lot of projects that happen across the organization. So it was really interesting to see all of that, and it's the way it's really strategically and like there's a whole process to it, which I personally have never seen it being laid out that way. So I thought that was really interesting. Plus, I love the Lord of the Rings references. Yeah, but I think you've already even Tapan and I think Utsava also covered one of the questions that popped up is like managing the ways and means that we're using to sort of get the point across to these stakeholders, and making sure the communication channel stays open, and we get a consistent response from them, because I think that's one of the things, especially for long running projects, that can become a little bit of a hurdle, where initially there was a lot of traction, and then slowly other things become maybe a priority, and then you don't really get the response, the kind of response that you sort of want. So I guess it's just going with again, showing them the criticality of it. I guess would that how you would you put it that way? Sort of bringing them back to the
or reassessing the stakeholder landscape, Parvati. It for long running projects, it could very well happen that the roles have changed, but nobody has officially stated it, or at the least the priorities have changed for them, their focus has shifted, and hence no matter how much we would think that originally this person was appointed for this and was supposed to communicate and engage or get involved in these things. Now that person is not, but looking deeper helps us understand that. And it's not a bad idea to kind of revisit, let's say every 6 months or 1 year for really long lasting projects or teams for that matter, right? To see and say that if there's a shift in priorities in the role, in the involvement, we should refresh or revise, and that's where the process being iterative comes into play. That it's not that you once define the plan and set it out into motion and then you are done. Unfortunately, it's not that.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bansi, I think this one last question, which we can take asynchronously. If there's any reading material, would you please share it with us? If you send it in on email, then what I'll do is I'll share it with this group on this chat message.
In fact, some of the examples that I showed, the templates, while I don't have the software or the tool, we do have the those templates made in the Google Sheet, and I could share that as well with you. So that could give you a beginning point in terms of if you anyone wants to decide to use it.
Oh, sure. Oh, wow. That's a generous offer. Thanks a lot, Bansi.
Absolutely.
But I think this question came from Narendra, and knowing him, I think when he asked about reading material, this is more like any books, something that.
The list.
Yeah. If you could share it with us, I would go ahead and send it to him. That being said, I think we are way over time. I had a few questions, but how about we just take it off the call?
Yeah. That works.
All right.
Thank you for your patience, and
thanks a lot, Bansi. And I think Utsav is going to take over for 1 more minute, and then we can just go ahead and hang up.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for this wonderful talk. And I think one of my teammates messaged me, and I quote, "I love it." So I'm just going to write him out. So Sajjad messaged me, and his question was, and I think many of our question is that, can we get access to the PPT? Will you be sharing this PPT with us?
Yeah. I'll be sharing the PPT and the spread for workbook both.
Yeah, that sounds great. Again, thank you very much for giving this talk with our community, and thank you to all the attendees who have participated with us. And this talk's recording will be available on our YouTube channel after a few days. And anyone who has not attended it or have missed it out can go and check it out on our channel. Yeah, and I think next up we have Amber and Vince from Red Hat coming up with a talk on user design and research. They'll be talking about what is UX and how research and design helps to build products the right way and help developers and all the stakeholders building the right product. Yeah, that's it from our side. Thank you, Amber. And thank you, everyone. Sorry, thank you, Bansi. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks, Bansi. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.